Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastamavit Vishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome, everyone. Sorry, check close my phone. There you go. Any questions relating to this subject, relating to the Gita, relating to anything? Shashi? No. I saw there's a hand up on your screen for some reason, emoji, so that's why I thought I asked you. Okay. So, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1. Today we'll cover verses 10 to 19. So far, what we've covered in a nutshell is that the Kauravas and the Pandavas, cousins, Kauravas cheated the Pandavas of their kingdom in a game of dice. The Pandavas had to go and live in the jungle, the forest, for 13 years. They fulfilled that obligation and came back to Hastinapur to claim their kingdom. Kaurava said, come back after 13 years, I'll give you the kingdom back. Duryodhana. But when they returned, Duryodhana refused to give the kingdom back. So Duryodhana said, fight me for it. And the Pandavas had no choice but to fight a battle against the Kauravas to take back what was theirs in the first place. The Kauravas represent evil, unrighteousness. The Pandavas, the good, the righteousness. The world is made of pairs of opposites, hot and cold. Heat, sun, and you get hot and cold, good and bad. You think about how the world is. Everything is pairs of opposites, short and tall, thin and fat. This is the characteristics of the world. So here, Kauravas represents the bad, the Pandavas the good. So the battle is to begin against the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The first chapter, we said, is divided into 6 topics. We're going to finish the last verse of topic 2, verse 10, and then start topic 3. So good and bad is within us as well. Our mind thinks of good things and bad things. He wants to do certain actions which are bad. Bad in the sense not right for you. And how do you overcome those thoughts, those actions? This is what is represented by the Gita. We all have these positive and negative tendencies. How do you deal with the negative tendencies? This is what it's about. It's elaborated as a battle just because people like stories. People relate to stories. But this is what it represents. Now, before we begin today's class, just want to explain, you may have all heard of the caste system. Yeah, in India, the caste system, they practice this. There are 4 castes. Does anyone know the 4 castes? Anyone know the 4 castes? Name anyone.
Jati.
Sorry?
Jati.
Meaning?
Jati means caste. Gujarati words is jati.
So what are the four castes?
Kshatriya, Kshatriya,
The Brahmin,
Brahmins.
Kshatriya, which are warriors, I think.
What's the other two?
Vaishnav,
Vaishya, yeah.
Shudra.
Shudra, wonderful. Brahmin is the priest class, regarded as the highest class. Kshatriya is the warrior class, fighting battles. Vaishyas is the business class, traders. And lastly is the Shudras, the labor class. So those are the four castes that they created in India. They were created for a particular reason at a particular time. But now those times have changed. And it actually represents something very different now. So Pandavas and Kauravas belong to the Kshatriya caste, which means they were in the warrior caste. In those days, that caste and the Brahmin caste was predominant. Warrior was like the highest class with the Brahmin. The traders and the laborers were the lower caste. But things changed based on time. Now, what is a higher caste? The Vaishyas, business class. Those are regarded as respect because they have lots of money. This is what we respect now. Warriors, we don't. Brahmins, they have a role, but we have a little bit of respect. But we, in this day and age now, respect wealth, power. You see how things have changed. In those days, during the Mahabharata time, it was the Kshatriyas, the warriors who were regarded as the high, because they defended the land against bad. Any questions? And the reason I explain this is because what we're going to cover is that there's so much high respect for these warriors, Arjuna, Krishna, Duryodhana. They're given the highest respect, Bhishma, because of that situation at the time. Yeah, they are more regarded higher than a wealthy person. Vanita, you had a question.
You know, the caste system in that time, was it based on like was it created based on their personalities? Like if they're like a Rajasic person, or like, is that how the caste system was created in the beginning, isn't it? It's just misunderstood now. Is that correct?
Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic. You all know, well, most of you know the difference. Rajasic, Tamasic is someone who's lazy, indolent. How can he become a warrior? Even if he's born to a warrior, how can he become a warrior? Yeah. Rajasic, someone who's full of action. Yeah, he could become a warrior. And Sattvic, Brahmin, someone who is righteous, who is a good person. You know, he knows about about Brahman, our scriptures. He's a Sattvic person. Nowadays, you're born to a Brahmin and you're regarded as a Brahmin, no matter how good or bad the person is. He's of the higher caste because he's born to a Brahmin family. He may be really Tamasic, but we're given that status because he was born. But in those days, anybody could be a Kshatriya, anybody could be a Brahmin if they had that quality in those days. But now it's completely different. Is that okay, Vanita? Any other questions relating to that? Okay, great. So we'll begin with verse 10, which is the last verse of topic 2. So I'll chant once and then you can all chant on the second time. Apariyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishma pirakshitam paryaptam Paryaptam vidamete sam balam bhima pirakshitam aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishma pirakshitam paryaptam vidamete sam balam bhima pirakshitam. Can everyone turn their mics off, please? I love your voice, but translation: this army of ours, protected by Bhishma, is unlimited, whereas that army of theirs, protected by Bhima, is limited. This is Duryodhana talking to Bhishma. Duryodhana's ego is manifesting. He's basically saying, my army is more superior than the Pandavas. This is what he's saying to Bhishma. My army is more superior than the Pandavas' army. I have a greater amount of battalions, 11 battalions compared to theirs, 7 battalions. My army is led by the great Bhishma, while the Pandavas' army is led by Bhima, Arjuna's brother. Basically, what he's saying is, I have a big, great army led by such a great warrior. Look at the Pandavas. They have a smaller army than me. They're led by the inexperienced Bhima. Inexperienced compared to Bhishma. He's trying to persuade himself there's nothing to be scared of. Look what I have compared to them. He's trying to substantiate to himself, to his own mind, which is agitated, is afraid. So he's saying to himself, I'm stronger. Why am I worried? But being egoistic, there's no humility in him. So he's telling Bhishma, look, Bhishma, we're all right. Compared to Pandavas, we've got nothing to worry about. We do that when we want to make the mind want something which is not right, but we substantiate it by evaluating within ourselves. It's okay, I can do this. Look at my situation compared to theirs. Why would I? It's like the, what's that poem? The ducks are swimming, the pond. Some of you have, the duck is trying to, the chick is trying to substantiate why it can't swim. It convinces itself why it couldn't swim. My feathers, my beak is the same. Why can't I swim like the ducks? And what happens? It drowns. Similarly, so Duryodhana is trying to justify himself, nothing to be afraid of. Ravi, can you read the commentary?
Duryodhana declares that his army is unlimited, indicating its superiority to the Pandava army. Its superiority lay not only in its greater numbers, but in the fact that Bhishma, one of the greatest living warriors of the time, commanded it. He further states that the Pandava army is limited, meaning weaker, and states that the Pandava army is limited, meaning weaker and more vulnerable. It was led by Bhima, whose knowledge of arms and mastery
of the art of warfare. Sorry, Ravi, your mic is, I can't hear you. Can everyone hear him? Yeah, something wrong with your mic.
Oh, does it work?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
So I'll read that again.
He further states that the Pandava army is limited, meaning weaker and more vulnerable. It was led by Bhima. You can continue.
It was led by Bhima, whose knowledge of arms and mastery of the art of warfare stood in poor contrast to that of Bhishma. The ego and arrogance of Duryodhana now pronounces the greatness of his numbers, his strength, and his glory. Sorry? Oh, sorry. The word aparyapta has been translated as unlimited and paryapta as limited. Another rendering of this verse translates aparyapta as insufficient and paryapta as sufficient. If the second translation is taken, it further substantiates Duryodhana's sense of insecurity and fear. The Kauravas had 4 battalions, more than the Pandava army. Moreover, the Kaurava army was commanded by the invincible Bhishma. Yet, all this did not suppress the deep-set fear in Duryodhana. Fear? Fear is an emotion which grips all destructive animals. The carnivore exhibits fear with little provocation. In striking contrast, the herbivore rarely shows any sign of fear. The more cruel and destructive an animal, the more terrified it feels at the suggestion of any danger. Conversely, the more meek and gentle an animal, the more calm it remains in the face of danger, even at the threshold of death. The same principle holds good for human beings. Duryodhana's cruel and destructive tendencies explain the element of fear manifest in his speech on the verge of battle.
Thank you, Ravi. Any questions? Okay, everyone understand? Yeah? Nilam, make sense? Great. We'll do verse 11. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagamavistitaha Bhishmameva pirakshantu pavanta sarva eva hi ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagamavastitaha Bhishmameva pirakshantu bhavanta sarva eva hi. And stationed in your respective positions in all divisions, all of you, guard Bhishma alone. Once again, Duryodhana is saying this to his army. Now, chanting these verses, if everyone tries to do the best they can, even in their own mind, because the vibrations you will get from chanting is difficult to explain, but it will resonate within you. It has some sort of feel-good factor that it will have within you. And you're never going to get a chance to chant again. So take this opportunity to chant the best you can. Yeah. It's entirely up to you, but it's just a suggestion. Yeah. I know it's difficult in the beginning, but you know what? After a couple of chapters, you'll be fluent. So try your best. So, Bhishma. Now, Bhishma, his original name is Devrata. Devavrata, that's Bhishma's original name. Bhishma actually means terrible. And the reason he's been given this name is that some time ago, King Santanu, who Bhishma is his son, Bhishma is King Santanu's son, he was the heir to the throne. Bhishma was heir to the throne. But what happened? The father, Bhishma's father, fell in love with a fisherman's daughter. And he wanted to marry her. But the girl's father said, "We will only let you marry my daughter if her children become heir to the kingdom. If you marry my daughter, their children has to be the heir." A of course, the heir belonged to Bhishma. So for the sake of his father, Bhishma took a vow that he would not take the kingdom. When the king died, he would not take over the kingdom. But the daughter's father said, okay, you won't take the kingdom, but what about your children? So he took a vow that he would never get married, ever, so he wouldn't have any children, just to satisfy the fisherman, so that his daughter can marry his father, for his father's sake. So he was given this name Bhishma, which means terrible, because it was a terrible vow he took. I mean, this whole war is because of that one vow he took. They're fighting for his kingdom. If he hadn't taken that vow, this war wouldn't be happening. And because of this vow he took, he was given a blessing, a boon, that he could not die unless he consented to it. Now, this is the power of Bhishma. He can never die unless he says, I'm ready to die. Now, there are many stories behind all these characters in the Mahabharata. Now, our interest is in the teachings of the Gita itself, the Lord's song. But there are so many background stories to it. So I'll just, because we're going to mention Bhishma quite a bit, I should explain why he's called Bhishma, which means terrible. So Duryodhana, in this verse, Duryodhana advises his army to protect Bhishma on all accounts, even though Bhishma was very powerful. And he had the power, as we said, that he cannot die unless he wanted to. Now, the reason why Duryodhana says this to his army is because, once again, another story. In the Pandavas' army, there was a person called Sikandi. Sikandi was born a woman, but was transformed to a man later on. Bhishma would never fight a female. And in his eyes, Sikandi was still a female. So only person from the Pandava army that could kill Bhishma is Sikandi. Hence, Duryodhana says, protect him. He did not want to lose Bhishma because he was looked up to by the army. Bhishma was a righteous person. And if he died, then the Kaura's army would be weakened. Secondly, due to Bhishma's virtues, reputation, he had a high ideal. The army was able to unite because of Bhishma. Nobody wanted to fight for Duryodhana, but it's because Bhishma was in charge, they respected him. And that unity would be gone if Bhishma died. See, Duryodhana's reason for fighting was self-centered, selfish. So Bhishma's reputation was used for his personal gain, Duryodhana's personal gain, to try and take what's not his. He's using Bhishma for selfish reasons. Any questions? Does that make sense, everyone? Dharmesh, make sense? Yeah, just giving a bit of the background. Slowly, we'll be giving these little backgrounds that makes to help you to understand the Gita better. Yeah. Why is it called terrible? Now you know. Ravi, just read the whole thing.
Duryodhana exhorts the generals in his army to maintain their respective positions in the battle array and guard Bhishma above all. Bhishma was a warrior of exceptional strength and valor. Moreover, his great personal sacrifice to his father, King Sanatanu, had earned him a boon that death would not overcome him without his consent. Nevertheless, Duryodhana shows an undue concern for the safety of Bhishma. There could be two reasons for such anxiety. First, Duryodhana knows too well that Bhishma, as a true Kshatriya, will follow the canons of chivalry. A Kshatriya would never oppose or fight a female. Draupadi's son, Sikandi, in the Pandava army was born a girl and later transformed into a male through the supernatural power of his benefactor, Sutkarna. Nevertheless, Bhisma regarded him as a female. Duryodhana therefore fears that Bhisma will become helpless if Sikandi confronts him in battle. Should such a situation arise, the Kaurava army would lose Bhisma and with him all his strength. Hence, Duryodhana takes great care and precaution in admonishing his generals to protect Bhisma. The second possible reason for Duryodhana's anxiety to guard Bhisma could arise from the importance of integrating the Kaurava forces. Many diverse forces made up the Kaurava army. It lacked a common cause or ideal for waging a war. Somehow these forces had to be brought together as a unified front against the enemy. As a selfish person, Duryodhana mobilized the forces only for his self-centered desire to usurp the kingdom. No high ideal served as an integrating element among the warriors on his side. Duryodhana realizes this. Thus, he had to exploit the good name of Bhisma as his only possibility of integration. Everyone held Bhisma in the highest esteem for the great virtues which he epitomized. Duryodhana uses Bhisma's exalted reputation to effectively integrate the ranks of his army. He calls upon the generals to guard Bhisma alone.
There we go. Any questions? So this is why it's all psychological here. Until we get to chapter 2, this gives you the background of what's going on. When Krishna starts talking in chapter 2, that's when the philosophy will start. So we have to go through this to get an understanding of the idea. You know, when they have a movie, before the main theme, they give you the background of all the characters, so you understand the message. So this is what we're doing. So now we begin the third topic. Now, in this topic, it merely talks about both sides blowing their conches. Everyone knows a conch, you know? I think we've been to a few weddings lately. The barman is blowing the conch and makes a noise. So this is what they're going to do now, getting prepared for battle. The war is about to begin. And each of the characters, the main leaders, they all had their own special conches. Some small, some large. All their conches had a name. And we're going to hear about that. They had their own name. They had their own signature sound. And this was blown before battle. It was customary to try and scare the other side. So this topic talks about the different conches and the different characters that are blowing them. Yeah, there's a little bit of psychology in there, and we'll go through that. Okay. Tasya sanjanayan harsam guru vrittaha pitamaha simhanadam vinad yochaihi shankham dadmau pratapavan tasya sanjanayan harsham guru vrittaha pitamaha simhanadam vinad yochaihi shankham dadmau pratapavan. The mighty grandsire, the aged guru, raising aloud a lion's roar, blew his conch to cheer him up. So Bhisma, once again, a lot older compared to the rest of the warriors in his army, much stronger and braver. He could see Duryodhana is dejected a little bit. He needed a bit of lifting up, Duryodhana. As we said, Duryodhana was a self-centered person, bad, evil. Bad, evil divinize their negative tendencies. They need the help of the good. They cannot otherwise function. He needed Bhishma to reunite the rest of the army. So they needed encouragement from Bhishma, because they all knew they were fighting an unrighteous war. So Bhishma, he sensed this lack of conviction in the soldiers and in the nervousness of Duryodhana. He's a wise guru, meaning one of the elders who knew about life, about warfare. He could sense Duryodhana was nervous. So Bhishma blew his conch to bring unity and to signify the start of the battle. The fellow members of the army responded by blowing their conches and other instruments. Can you picture that? Bhishma, the leader, blows his big conch, and the rest of the army hear this and say, right, let's get ready. And they all blow their conches as well. That's all it says. Nilam?
The third topic covers verses 12 to 19. It describes the tumultuous sound of conches produced by the two forces assembled in the battlefield and how the Kauravas were terrified. Bhishma is referred to as mighty grandsire, an aged guru. Bhishma was a very old member of the Guru clan. Though advanced in age, he surpassed even the foremost young warriors of his time, both in strength and heroism. Also, being the granduncle of both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, he was deeply respected and revered by all participants in the war. Duryodhana needed the support of Bhishma. Duryodhana's motives and ambitions were mean. His forces lacked the strength and conviction to face the mighty Pandavas. He was worried and anxious. He now looks up to the greatness and goodness of Bhishma to mobilize his evil forces to action. Evil forces in this world find it difficult to unite and function without the help of the good. A short-tempered man expressing his anger claims that he fights for his principles. He will not admit his weakness in losing his temper. He defends himself, claiming that he upholds certain right principles which others are violating. Similarly, a lustful man takes refuge in the name of love. He suffers from a weakness for the other sex. He does not see his weakness, much less admit it. Instead, he claims it is based on love and affection for fellow beings. Thus, human beings try to moralize their negative tendencies. Bhishma noticed the feeling of uncertainty in the mind of Duryodhana. He decided to cheer him up and rally the forces together. For that purpose, he roared loudly like a lion and blew his conch with great force. This hearty sound marked the commencement of the battle.
There we go. Duryodhana is justifying his negative tendencies, like we all do. We get angry and we say, yes, I'm right to get angry. We justify it. I'm right, you're wrong. This is how the mind works. Any questions? Okay. Next verse. We're going to go through these verses quite quickly. Verse 13. Tata sankhascha bairyascha panavana gomukhaha sahasaiva vyahanyanta sasaktastu bhavat. Tata sankhascha bairyascha panavana gomukhaha sahasaiva vyahanyanta sasaptastumulo bhavat. Then conches, kettle drums, tabors, drums and cow horns blared forth quite suddenly. That noise was tumultuous. The Kaurava army are mentally agitated. They're about to go into battle. and they respond to Bhishma's blowing of his conch by blowing their own conches and other instruments such as drums, tabor, and many different loud instruments. Tumultuous means rowdy, tremendous amount of noise. Bhishma was a wise person. He had good values, as we said. He knew what Duryodhana was trying to do. And because of Bhishma's high values, he had no choice but to serve the king. Sometimes your own high values of standard you set yourself can get you into trouble. Remember, in life, two minds can never be the same. We have our own mind. It's bad enough. For people who've been coming to these classes, you know how devastating the mind can be. It's bad enough trying to control our own mind. Then we get married, dealing with two minds. There'll be conflict no matter what. Doesn't matter how compatible my partner is, me and soulmates. We're 99% compatible. Still, the minds are different. You have to understand that. Remember, who's not married in this group? Be ready for that. Two minds. There will always be a difference. But if one of the partner has some of this knowledge and understanding, you can overcome those conflicts. You can overcome any conflict in a relationship. And if both of you have this knowledge, that's what you regard as being in heaven. Any relationship, if you have the relationship based on the foundation of this knowledge, you're in heaven. Even a parent and a child, easy to get over conflicts if you understand that both minds are different. There's nothing you can do about it. This is the way it is. So if you have this understanding, next time your partner, your child, is behaving in a particular way, you understand this is his mind, her mind. They can't help themselves. They can only act based on that. Now you want them to act based on your values, your mind. How is it possible? It's impossible. And then you have conflicts. How does this knowledge help you override these conflicts? Those of you who've been coming for some time, how can this knowledge help you override those conflicts? Yeah, Ravi.
I think it allows me to, question my emotions, how I react to it. So I'm in control of how I react. So always pause for a second before I open my mouth again, repeat it back to the wife. So
you become less reactive.
Exactly.
Let my wife have her say. I'm not going to be affected. Ravi's talking from experience.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
We won't get into a conflict here now. Anybody else? Thank you, Ravi, sharing that. You're absolutely right. But your wife says there's a bit more work to be had, which I understand. None of us are perfect. Anyone else? How can this knowledge help you to overcome conflicts? Yeah, Vanita?
I think you realize how important it is not to let your ego get in the way of being right or wrong, or being, you don't always have to have your say at the end. It doesn't matter, because that person's not going to understand if they're being it's conflicting. They're not going to realize, they're not going to come and meet you halfway. So it doesn't even matter if they don't. I suppose that makes a difference.
Why is that, by the way, what we're saying? Why is that? Why they don't understand what you're saying?
Because their intellect doesn't allow them to, I suppose, their mind.
Different mind. You're trying to argue with their mind. Your mind is arguing with their mind. Both minds are different. As you get this knowledge, you have different values. And at the end of the day, you think for a minute, what am I arguing about? And it's normally a load of rubbish. He said, I said, she said, something silly. What's the point? So you understand that. You don't get emotionally involved. You can think for a minute and say, you know, this is silly. Why am I arguing? Doesn't matter. Let them say whatever they want to say. I agree. Subdues the situation. So this knowledge gives you higher values of life. You understand, it's not about wealth, power, name, fame. It's about spiritual development. This is my course. This is my values. This is my goal. Anything else that comes in the way is meaningless. This is what it teaches you. And if you don't have this knowledge, then you stick to those kind of values. Duryodhana is sticking to his value. I want the kingdom. How dare they take it back from me? It's mine, even though it's not. Bhishma understands, you know, this is his mind. This is his nature. I don't have those values, but I've taken a vow. I have to serve the king. Similarly, you've taken a vow, you have to serve your partner, right or wrong, with this understanding. Any questions? Yeah. So just take that away from today's class. Change your life. Two minds are not alike. Where were we? Did we chant 13? We chanted 13.
It's not been read.
Neelam. Sorry, I lost my where I was. Sorry, not Neelam. Arunaben. Is it Arunaben? No. Who else? Vanita. Sorry.
It's Vanita.
The conches, kettle drums, tabor, drums and cow horns blared forth quite suddenly. The noise was tumultuous. The entire Gaurav army heard the sounds of Bhishma's conch. The general of the Kauravas side responded immediately by sounding his conches, kettle drums, tabors, drums and trumpets. The noise was sudden and tumultuous. The war had begun.
War had begun. The conches have been blown. The war had begun from the Kaurava side. So let's see what the Pandavas are doing. Verse 14. Tatha svete harye yukte mahati shandane stitau madhava pandavas-chaiva divyo sankhau pradat mutuhu tatha svete hare yukte mahati shandane stitau madhava pandavas-chaiva divyo sankhau pradat mutuhu. Then, seated in a magnificent chariot, yoked to their white horses, Madhava and Pandava also blew the divine conches. So this is the response from the Pandavas' side. And this is Sanjaya telling Yudhishthira, far away. Remember, Sanjaya is narrating this story of what's going on to Yudhishthira, Kaurava's father, Duryodhana's father, and he had the power to see from far away what's going on in the army, what's going on in the war. So Sanjaya tells Yudhishthira, and Sanjaya is actually a devotee of Krishna. He knows what's going on here. Sanjaya knows this is wrong, but he's got a role to play as well. He's a devotee of Krishna. He reveres Krishna. So he's saying, and he's talking about the magnificent chariot, the horses, the white horses. He's explaining it to Yudhishthira. But he actually means the presence of Krishna and Arjuna. Look at Krishna and Arjuna. But he couldn't say that to Yudhishthira. So he said, look at their chariots. It's magnificent. His horses are magnificent. But he actually reversed to Krishna and Arjuna. He said, Krishna and Arjuna responded from their chariot by blowing their conches in response to Bhishma's conches and the Kaurava's conches. And the sound was amazing, loud. Their conches were considered divine because they had this character. So this is what Sanjaya is telling Yudhishthira, that in response, the Pandava and Krishna blew their conches. Vanita.
Then seated in a magnificent chariot, yoked to white horses, Madhava and Pandava also blew their divine conches. Seated in their chariot, Krishna, Madhava, and Arjun, Pandava, heard the tumultuous noise of the Kauravas, material instruments of music. A gift to Arjun by the fire god, the chariot was of exceptional beauty and strength. This magnificent chariot was drawn by 4 white celestial horses, taken from the 100 celestial horses given by King Chitraratha. The 4 horses and chariots were said to have had the power to go anywhere on earth or heaven. Krishna and Arjun blew their divine conches in reply to the tumultuous noise made by the Kaurava forces. Their conches were also extraordinary in character, hence they have been called divine.
Verse 15. Panchajanyam Rishikesho Devadattam Dhananjayaha Paundram Dadmo Mahasankham Bhimakarma Vrikodaraha Panchajanyam Rishikesho Devadattam Dhananjayaha Paundram Dadmo Mahasankham Bhimakarma Vrikodaraha. Rishikesha blew the Panchajanya. Dhananjaya, the Devadatta, and Vrikodara, of terrible deeds, the great conch Pondra. Don't get too involved with the words. All it means is that they blow their conches. Now, Arjuna and Krishna had many different names. And in different verses, they'll be called by various names. I'm just preparing you for that. Krishna is referred to as Rishikesha in this verse, which means Lord of the senses. Yeah. It says Rishikesha blew the Panchajanya. Panchajanya is the name of his conch. He's the Lord of the senses. We have 5 senses. What are the 5 senses for the newcomers? What are the 5 senses? Anybody? 5 senses. Vanita?
Is it sight, smell, taste, touch, and I don't know.
So with the 5 senses, we take in the world. Smell, taste, sight, hearing, touch. Those are the 5 senses we react with the world. What is the controller of those senses? What is the controller of those senses within us? Meghna?
Is it the mind?
The mind. The mind controls the senses. What controls the mind? Shashi?
The intellect.
If it's powerful enough, the intellect. Yes? What controls the intellect? The ultimate. What controls the intellect?
Is it the
Meghna?
self?
The self. Thank you very much. Who said that?
Sorry, Meghna.
Meghna. The self. So what controls intellect? Atman, the self, the spirit that's within. Remember, human is made up of your physical body, your mind, your intellect, and the self. Spirit, Atman, God principle, supreme being, whatever you want to call it. Without that, you cannot function. So Krishna is referred to as Lord of the senses, meaning the supreme being. Yeah, that's why it's called Rishikesha in this verse. So many different names will be referring to Krishna. Many different names will be given to Arjuna based on the verse. So there, Sanjaya, who is a devotee of Krishna, is saying Rishikesha, meaning Atman Brahman. Arjuna, as the winner of wealth, due to his successful achievements on the battlefield and for bringing great wealth to the kingdom, he's called Dhananjaya, meaning done wealth. Yeah, he has won many battles and got so much wealth for his kingdom. So he's called Dhananjaya, winner of wealth, bringing great wealth to the kingdom. The Pandava army responded by blowing their conches to show their unity. The sound was a lot more menacing, and it showed up the fear and terror in the Kaurava army. And the names are given of their conches. Krishna, he blew his conch called Panchajanya. Dhananjaya, another name for Arjuna, blew his conch called Devdatta. And Bhima, Arjuna's brother, blew his conch called Pondra. That's all it's saying. Yeah, in a nutshell, all it's saying is that they blew their conches, and this is the name of their conches. Yeah, I'm adding a little bit of philosophy in there to keep you all awake. Okay, who's reading the commentary?
Krishna is addressed here as Rishikesha. Rishika refers to any one of the senses. Isha means Lord. Rishikesha, derived from these two words, mean Lord of the senses. The Lord or controller of the senses is Atman, the self within. Krishna therefore symbolizes the supreme being. Panchajanya was the name of Krishna's conch, named after the demon he had killed. Krishna blew the Panchajanya. Dhananjaya was one of the names of Arjuna. It literally means winner of the wealth. Arjuna earned his name after conquering many kingdoms and bringing great wealth to the Pandava capital. Arjuna blew the conch Devdatta. Arjuna had obtained it from Indra, the king of heaven. This conch sounded so loud that it struck terror into the enemy ranks. Vrikodara is Bhima, one of the Pandava brothers. Vrikodara literally means wolf-bellied. Bhima acquired that name as he was a voracious eater with an extraordinary power to assimilate large quantities of food. Bhima possessed exceptional physical strength. His deeds infused terror in the hearts of those who saw or even heard of them. Hence, he was known as Bhima of terrible deeds. Bhima's conch was named Pondara. The Pondra was very large and its sound reverberated over a long distance. Bhima blew his great conch along with Krishna and Arjuna.
Giving the picture of the battlefield, what's going on? Verse 16. Ananta Vijayam Raja Kunti Putro Yudhishthiraha Nakula Sahadevascha Sugoshamani Pushpakau. Ananta Vijayam Raja Kunti Putro Yudhishthiraha Nakula Sahadevascha Sugosha Mani Pushpako. King Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, blew Ananta Vijaya, and Nakula and Sahadeva, Sugosha and Mani Pushpaka. Once again, they mention names of the conches and who blew which conch. These are the rest of the brothers: Bhima, Arjuna, Yudhishthira, Nakula, and Sahadeva, the 5 brothers of the Pandava, 5 Pandava brothers. Now, while mentioning the nature of the sound to Yudhishthira, Sanjaya tries to warn him subtly of the fate of his sons in this emanating war. Sanjaya is trying to persuade Yudhishthira, look, their conches sound terrible. What's going to happen to the Kaurava army? He refers to Yudhishthira as king, since he was the rightful king and will be after the war is over. His subtlety he can't slap Yudhishthira and say, what the hell are you doing? Stop your sons before they die. He can't say that. Yeah, but he's subtly trying to say that to Yudhishthira. Now, someone asked the question, why have the conches been given their names, such names? Well, one, they were regarded, because of the sound, they had a particular signature. So, and each one belonged to a particular person. It was his conch, and it was customary to give them a name. It's like, you have a car, you sometimes call it, I think, Citally said her name used to be called, car's name was called Daffy, for example. Yeah, so you sometimes have names for your cars. This belongs to you. Yeah, and you give a name to say it's mine. There's a particular characteristics. Some people, I think Swamiji gave an example, cricket bat. The Indian cricket team. They call their names by they call their bats by certain names that means something to them. So similarly, these conches were given names that had some personal meaning to each individual person, maybe of their sound, of the size, etc., etc. That's why the conches have been given names. I think Divya asked that question. Hope that's okay. Okay. Robin?
Pandu, brother of Dhritarashtra, had 5 sons. Of the 5, Yudhishthira, Bhima, and Arjuna were born of his first wife, Kunti, and Nakula and Sahadev of his second wife, Madri. Perhaps to indicate that these brothers were not sons of the same mother, this verse refers to Yudhishthira as the son of Kunti. Here, Sanjaya refers to Yudhishthira as king, though he did not reign at the time of the war. Such a reference seems justifiable because he was, in fact, the rightful king. His kingdom had been usurped by his cousin, Duryodhana. Sanjaya's words also contain the powerful implication that Yudhishthira will resume sovereignty when the war ends. Yudhishthira had conquered many kingdoms at the time of the Rajasya sacrifice. His conch had sounded victory after victory. Hence, his conch was also known as Ananta Vijayam, which literally means endless victory. Nakul and Sahadev blew their conches named Sugosha and Mani Pushpaka, which literally means sweet-toned and jewel blossom.
So names were given based on the conch's characteristic or the person who owned the conches, his great feats in battle. Any questions? We're just going to finish this topic today. The next 3 verses are quite small. So verse 17. Kasyascha parameshvasaha sikhandi cha maharatha drishtad yumno viratascha satyakischa parajitaha. Repeat. Kasyascha parameshvasaha Sikhandi cha Maharataha Drishtayumno Viratascha Satyakischa Parajitaha. And Kashya, king of Kasi, an excellent archer, and Sikhandi, a Maharatha, great chariot warrior, Drishtayumna and Virata, and the invincible Satyaki. Names of warriors from Pandava's army. Sikhandi is mentioned there. We already explained he was born a woman, but was somehow converted to a man. And we said Bhishma, noble, upright warrior, would never fight a woman. So the only person who could kill him is Sikhandi. Now we're going to chant verse 18 now. Some verses are given as two together because they have the same sort of explanation. Drupado Draupadeyascha Sarvasha Prithivipate Sobadrascha Mahabahu Sankhandadmuk Pritak Pritak Drupado Draupadeyascha Sarvasha Prithivipate Sobadrascha Mahabahu Sankhandadmo Pritak Pritak. O Lord of Earth, Drupada and the sons of Draupadi, and the mighty armed son of Subhadra, all of them blew their respective conches. Once again, it's just talking about the different characters on the Pandava side. So we'll just read the commentary. There's nothing really to explain. Arunabin, is it Arunabin or Hema?
And Kashya, king of Kasi, an excellent archer, and Sikhandi, a Maharatha, great chariot warrior, Drishtayumna and Virata, and the invincible Satyaki. 18. O Lord of Earth, Drupada, and the sons of Draupadi, and the mighty armed son of Subhadra, all of them blew their respective conches. Kashya was the king of Kashi, and modern Benaras, Varanasi, Sikhandi, and Drishtayumna were the sons of King Drupada, the great Kshatriya, hero and Maharatha. Virata and the virtuous king of the Matsyas, in whose house the Pandavas lived incognito for 1 year. Satyaki had been the charioteer of Krishna. The sons of Draupadi were Prativindya, Shrutasoma, Shrutakarma, Satanika, and Shrutasena. The son of Subhadra was Abhimanyu, a fighter of extraordinary merit. The use of word Sarvasa, all, is meant to include the rest of the great warriors in the Pandava army. All of them blew their conches, proclaiming their unity and solidarity. Sanjaya addresses Drashtra as the Lord of the earth, meaning the ruler of the earth.
Verse 19. They're just talking about the rest of the prominent warriors in the Pandava army. Verse 19. Sago Sodartarastranam Hidayani Vyadarayat Nabascha Prithivim Chaiva Tumulo Vyanunandayayan Sago Sodartarastranam Hidayani Vyadarayat Nabascha Prithivim Chaiva Tumulo Vyanunadayan. That tumultuous sound rent the hearts of the Yudhishthira's host and made earth and sky reverberate. Sanjaya tries to portray a picture of doom to Yudhishthira in the hope that he would stop the war. The deep message Sanjaya tries to convey is that unrighteousness, even his large numbers, are always afraid of the righteous when confronted. Duryodhana is afraid, even though he's got a big army. Sanjay is trying to explain to Yudhishthira, listen, there's doom ahead. You're going to lose your sons. They're going to die. Krishna is on the Pandava side. You got no hope. He's trying to say, explain that to him. But of course, Yudhishthira, proud of his sons, has the power to stop the war, but he won't. Hema.
The sound produced by the conches of all the heroes of the Pandava army was deep and dreadful. It filled all the regions of the sky and earth. It struck terror in the hearts of the Kauravas and the warriors of their side. This sound was different from that produced by the Kaurava conches, which had no such disheartening effect upon the Pandavas. In mentioning the tumultuous nature of the sound, Sanjaya seems to warn Dhritarashtra of the fate of his sons in the devastating war. He hopes the aged king may use his power to stop the war even at this stage. There is another deep message in Sanjaya's words. The unrighteous, though larger in number, are always mortally afraid of the righteous when confronted.
So the main idea here is that in life, we all have problems. As we said, partner, children, accident, work issues, constant challenges, big and small in our lives. Before we had ISIS, now we have COVID. No matter what challenges we have in life, we will never have a challenge like Arjuna. What's our challenges compared to Arjuna's? Yeah, just compare. Anytime you have an issue in your life, compare to Arjuna. What is my challenge, my issue, my problem compared to Arjuna's? And with this knowledge that Krishna is going to give from chapter 2, he was able to rise up and fight and win the war. So we also, with our little challenges, little problems in our life compared to Arjuna's, with this knowledge, we can also overcome them. Hence, you have to stick to this classes and learn this knowledge so that you can deal with all your small problems. Any questions? She never lets me down, so.
So Sanjay is quite subtle in his messages to Dhritarashtra. Would you say that there's a kind of message in a sense of he's identified right from wrong, okay, and he tries to, the only person that could stop the war was Dhritarashtra, nobody else could, because he was the king at that time. So although he did get involved as such to try and subtly give the messages to say stop it, he didn't, the fact that he was subtle about it, would it suggest that he wasn't involved? So I'm thinking, if you notice there's right and wrong, okay, majority of us would step in and